At the last family dinner, my mother-in-law looked me straight in the eye and said I was a parasite. No one defended me. Not my husband, not even my son. That night, they toasted each other, while erasing me from the deed to the house I helped build. They replaced my name on gifts, rewrote who raised my child. They even told him, "Don't call her mom anymore." But I stayed quiet until the night I showed them the footage, and everything changed. What did they see on that screen? They call it a legacy dinner. Once every quarter, Vespera's family gathers in that grand dining room at the Marin house. High ceilings, oil portraits of people no one actually remembers, polished silverware that could blind you under the right lighting. It's all curated, every corner a museum to their self-image. I've set that table more times than I can count, but this one felt different. The forks were already placed before I got there, and when I looked down at the seating chart taped to the credenza, my name wasn't on it. Instead, right next to my wife's, it read, Arthur Guest. I didn't ask. I just pulled the chair out and sat. These nights always had a script. Toasts, soft jazz, overly fluffed soufflés, and tonight's headline was the new community leadership campaign spearheaded by Vespera and her sister Zadie. Their faces were all over the program booklet. I had helped write the mission statement 6 months ago, but that part didn't come up. I told myself to just get through it. Keep your head down, Blaine. Eat the roast, sip the wine, smile when spoken to. But something in the air felt charged, like the silence that comes right before a summer storm cracks the sky open. It started small. It always does. "You're lucky to be here, Blaine," said Uncle Charles, chuckling as he reached for the salt. "Not many get a seat at this table." Someone else chimed in. Arthur's real talent clearly runs in the bloodline. Zadie beamed. Vespera looked away. Even the waitstaff, trained to be invisible, glanced at me twice like I didn't belong. One leaned down, not unkindly, and whispered, "Sir, are you with the planning team or a guest?" I nodded vaguely. I didn't have the energy to correct her. When I returned to my seat, I noticed my name card had been replaced. It was flipped over. The back read "Guest" in sharp, confident print. In front of me, a perfectly folded napkin, shaped like a leaf. Isolde's signature fold. She once told me, "Elegance lies in the little things, Blaine. Those who notice it are usually the ones worth having at the table." I guess I wasn't one of them. And then, the toast. Isolde stood, tapping her crystal flute with a manicured finger. Her voice was smooth, measured, like a woman reading off a teleprompter she wrote herself. "To Zadie," she began, "whose vision reminds us all that legacy is earned, not inherited, and to Vespera, who continues to elevate our family name with poise and brilliance." Applause, smiles. I clapped too. I always did. "And to Blaine," she added, turning toward me with a tight smile, "who, like the moss on these old Georgia trees, manages to cling on without roots." Some laughter. A few startled chuckles, mostly from the side of the table where people drank faster than they listened. But I heard it, clearer than anything else that night. I didn't flinch. I didn't look at anyone. Just sat there, spine straight, while her words floated across the polished wood and landed squarely in front of me like a dare. Moss, rootless, decorative at best, parasitic at worst. That was the message, and worse than what she said was that nobody disagreed. I lifted my glass. "To those who believe good manners are louder than character," I said, voice even. A few smiles froze. Zadie blinked. Vespera coughed lightly into her napkin. Isolde tilted her head, earrings catching the light as she returned to her seat without comment. It wasn't a win. It was a warning shot, a delay in what was already unfolding. I turned my gaze to the far end of the room, where Calder sat at the kids' table, laughing at something on his iPad, completely unaware of the war being waged with words and side glances just feet away. Vespera leaned in close. "Don't start something tonight. she murmured, not looking at me. I didn't start it, I said. Dessert was served. No one asked if I wanted any. I counted how many people passed the plate without meeting my eyes. I started cataloging then. Seating arrangements, glass placement, the folded napkin, the missing name tag, the silence after the insult, the way no one asked about the work I had done. If they were going to rewrite my story, I figured I'd better start saving receipts. That night, I decided I wasn't going to be the man who held the damage in anymore. They wanted a parasite. I'd show them what grows quietly in the dark. After the toast, things didn't fall apart like glass. They shifted like floorboards settling after a storm. You couldn't see it, but you could feel it underfoot. People milled around with drinks, soft laughter filling the air like smoke. Compliments floated toward the daughters, toward the old family friends, toward anyone but me. I stood near the back of the room, holding an untouched glass of red I didn't ask for. Vespera was radiant, laughing easily in conversations that flowed without my presence. She moved like she belonged to every group in the room. I didn't move at all. I felt like part of the wallpaper, there, but not seen. A family friend, one of those been around since the beginning types, clapped me on the shoulder. You always show up, Blaine. That counts for something, right? I smiled. That word again. Show up. Like a dog at the porch, like weeds in the cracks. We stayed the night, like we always did. Not because I wanted to, but because routine has a way of disguising resentment. Calder had to brush his teeth before bed, and on the way to the bathroom, he tugged at my hand and pointed at the new gallery wall. I stopped. Where there used to be a photo of Vespera and me, taken at our wedding, candid, full of that kind of hope you don't recognize until it's gone, now hung a massive canvas print of Vespera and Calder. Just them. Gold-plated text beneath. The real legacy. I stood still. Calder didn't notice. He just smiled at the photo and walked ahead. No one else was around, but even if they had been, I doubt they'd have said anything. You don't announce a replacement. You install it. I didn't feel anger, not the sharp, explosive kind. What I felt was quieter, like a long, slow exhale of something you didn't know you were holding. There are insults that shout, and then there are erasures that echo. This one would ring for days. I followed Calder down the hall, breathing through the silence. Later, before we left, I peeked into his room to help him gather his things. On his bed was a brand new Lego robotics kit, one I recognized instantly. I had ordered it weeks ago. Had it delivered here, wrote a note in my handwriting. Keep building, son. Love, Dad. Calder lit up when he saw me looking. Grandma and Mom got this for me, he said. Grandma said it's 'cause I was brave at the dentist. I didn't react, not right away. Instead, I crouched down to zip up his backpack and spotted a crumpled piece of paper sticking out of the trash bin near the dresser. My hands moved slowly. I unfolded the note. There it was. My handwriting. My message. Except now, my name was crossed out with a blue marker, and someone else's had been written over it. They didn't just give him the gift. They erased the person who gave it. It wasn't about the toy. It was about presence, about rewriting the small moments that say, I see you, I love you. Downstairs, I found Vespera standing near the fireplace, talking to Zadie and a few family friends. She looked relaxed, powerful, in her element. I waited until the others walked away before stepping close. You changed the name on the gift. She didn't flinch. He doesn't need to know where it came from. He just needs to feel supported. No, I said. He needs to know who's showing up, not just who's smiling on Instagram. She shrugged, then turned her back. Not in guilt. In confidence. It wasn't just that she thought I didn't matter. She was sure I couldn't do anything about it. That night, after we drove back to my apartment and Calder had fallen asleep in the guest room, I opened my laptop and created a new folder. Title: Erasure. Inside, I started documenting. Gift reassigned. Photo replaced. Words overwritten dates. Times. Names. Locations. Even feelings. Especially those. They're not killing me, I typed. They're replacing me, and replacements leave no bruises. I pulled up an old picture of our wedding wall, the original one, before the new legacy photo. Saved it in a subfolder named Memory Against Fiction. I looked around the apartment. It was small, cluttered, quiet, but everything in it had my name on it. My fingerprints, my effort, my love. Let's see how far they're willing to go to tell a lie this neat. 2 days later, after work, I drove out to the Marin house under the excuse of picking up some leftover tax documents Thaddeus once kept in his office. No one was home. At least, no one who cared enough to ask why I was there. I used the spare key hidden behind the weathered iron planter on the porch. I'd placed it there myself 3 years ago, back when I still thought trust meant something. The house was too quiet, like it knew I didn't belong anymore, but hadn't figured out how to tell me. I walked into Thaddeus's old study. That room hadn't changed since the day we buried him. Smelled like oak and dust. Still carried the faint trace of his cologne. Cheap, stubborn, masculine, the kind that doesn't fade. Not right away. I stood there a minute. He was the only one who ever called me steady. Not brilliant, not charming, just steady, like it was a compliment. Back then, it meant something. One cabinet in the corner looked different, slightly off. The angle was wrong, like someone had moved it recently and tried to put it back just right, but memory betrayed them. I stepped over, opened the bottom drawer, and started going through it. I didn't know what I was looking for, just knew I had to find something before they buried the last thread of truth with him. Then I saw the envelope. It was labeled in his handwriting, Property Review, May. I sat down in his chair, the one with the cracked leather and the stiff right wheel, and opened it. Inside was a printed version of the estate planning document we'd reviewed together more than a year ago. Page 2 stopped me. My name was there, clear, listed as a co-signer and partial heir to the house and trust, legally binding. His signature. My role, all of it real. Then I found the sticky note. His handwriting again. Keep this. Just in case. My chest tightened, not from sadness, but from the realization that even Thaddeus knew what was coming. He saw it before I did. And still, he left me breadcrumbs. The pain wasn't that he was gone, it was how fast they replaced his plans, how quickly they called it outdated, irrelevant, non-binding. They didn't start erasing me with mockery. They started with edits. Back at my apartment, I sat at the kitchen table and pulled up my old email archive, typed in his name, scrolled through a year's worth of short, clipped replies. One of them read, "You're doing more than they admit. Don't stop showing up." I used to think that was encouragement. Now I see it was a warning. Funny thing is, Vespera once told me she admired how calm I stayed when things got tense, how I always knew how to keep people steady. Then, one day, that same calm was a liability. "You're emotionally avoidant," she'd said. "You check out." No, I checked in. I just didn't scream when the house was on fire. I documented where the flames came from. They didn't remove me all at once. They just stopped quoting me. Around 8 p.m., I heard voices downstairs, laughter, clinking glasses. I stepped out into the hallway, just enough to see the parlor. Era, my niece, was curled up on the couch between Vespera and Zadie, all smiles. They looked like a perfect little family portrait from a furniture catalog. I asked, "Hey, Era, did you get that invite for next week's family brunch?" She nodded, sipping soda from a glass too fancy for her age. "Yeah, Grandma said it's for the Club of the Worthy. You know, just grown-ups who make real decisions." My body didn't react. but something inside me twisted slow, like a rusted screw in old wood. I thanked her and walked away. Didn't say a word. I didn't need to. That phrase rang louder than as old as toast. It meant this wasn't passive exclusion. It was protocol. They were rehearsing my absence in front of the next generation. That night, back at home, I scanned the estate document and uploaded it into a secure folder. Legacy proof. Then I opened a blank email draft and began typing out a memo to Mise Whitlow. Bullet points, dates, names, quotes, screenshots. That sticky note from Thaddeus got its own paragraph. I opened a new browser tab and typed in, "Document authentication service near me. They buried my name before the body was cold. Time to dig it up." The apartment was quiet when we got back from school. Calder dropped his backpack near the entryway like he always did, and I picked it up without saying anything. I microwaved last night's meatloaf, added some corn from a can, and poured him a glass of milk. Routine, safe, easy. That routine, our shared rhythm, was the only part of my life that still felt mine. He sat at the table, scrolling through something on his tablet while I set down his plate. No smile, no, "Thanks, Dad." Just a nod and silence. I tried not to read into it. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was growing. Kids shift like the seasons, quietly, then all at once. I remembered a quote I'd heard once. The biggest changes in a child come in whispers, not bangs. That night, the whisper came. We were halfway through dinner when Calder looked up from his mashed potatoes and asked, casual as ever, "Should I call you Blaine at school? Grandma says it's more proper." I stopped breathing for a second. Not because of the question, but because of how easily he'd asked it, like it didn't mean anything, like he wasn't asking his father, but a neighbor. I didn't flinch, didn't drop my fork, didn't correct him. I just looked at him and asked, "Did she say anything else?" He shrugged. "Just that sometimes parents confuse what's best with what's convenient." I nodded slowly. The rest of the meal went down like gravel. After he brushed his teeth and crawled into bed, I sat alone in the kitchen. The wine glass from last weekend still sat on the counter, untouched. Vespera had brought it over with her usual "we're still friends" smile. I'd never opened the bottle. I stared at that glass, then reached for my notebook. New section title, Language Theft. She wants him to forget who sets the bedtime, who packed the lunches, who walked him to class after the flu shot when he wouldn't let go of my hand. This wasn't about being angry anymore. This was about survival. I started pulling old texts between Vespera and Isolde from my backup phone, screenshots, timestamps, messages that looked harmless if you weren't looking hard. But when you read them in sequence, they told a story. Make sure he hears that from you, not Blaine. Say it like it was your idea. It'll stick better. They weren't lying to Calder, not directly. They were replacing me, voice by voice, word by word. I looked through my call log. 4 missed calls from Vespera that week. All returned, all deflected. She never said what she really wanted. She didn't have to. I opened a browser tab and searched, "Custodial Manipulation Legal Precedent." Then I wrote the line at the bottom of the page. I won't take him from them, but I won't let them take me out of him either. Before bed, I placed a small recorder under the hallway table. Nothing dramatic, just enough to capture conversations near the door. Not for court, not yet, but I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. And I needed to hear what he was hearing when I wasn't around. The next morning, Calder came out with his backpack half-zipped, jacket inside out, and hair sticking up like it always did. He smiled at me, barely, said, "Let's go, blah, Dad." He caught it, mid-word, but he caught it. That slip stayed with me all day. It wasn't just a name, it was an echo, one they had planted, and I had let take root. I got home that evening and saved a new folder on my drive. Echo Recovery. They were using whispers. I would reply with proof. It was Era who let it slip. She'd been playing with Calder last week, running through the hallway with jelly on her chin when she said it in passing. "Are you going to the family brunch next Saturday? Grandma said it's just for the ones who matter." I asked her what that meant. She just shrugged and said, "You know, the club." That's how I found out about the quarterly Marin strategy meeting. So, Saturday morning, I dressed the way you do when you're walking into a room that doesn't want you there. Clean shirt, leather shoes, no tie. I held a notebook in my hand, not for taking notes, but for keeping myself from clenching my fists. I walked in through the side door of the garden house. The scent of lemon polish and fresh-cut flowers met me at the threshold. Soft jazz spilled from hidden speakers. Laughter floated from the other room. Nobody stopped me. Nobody welcomed me either. That's the thing about families like this. They don't slam doors. They just pretend you were never on the other side. I took a seat in the back corner, close enough to hear, far enough to stay out of their line of sight. The meeting started like a TED Talk. Isolde stood, poised as always, papers in hand like scripture. After 30 minutes of soft applause and updates, she slipped it in, casual as anything. "Moving forward," she said, "we feel it's best that only direct descendants vote on legacy-related decisions. It maintains clarity and honors the core line." She smiled when she said it. Vespera looked at her phone. Zadie nodded. Knoxley stirred his coffee. No one looked at me. I didn't say anything for a while. I waited until the room hushed enough to hear the hum of the air conditioner. Then I asked one question, quietly, calmly. Was I ever considered family to begin with? No one answered, and that told me everything. I stayed seated. Let them finish. Let them move on like nothing had happened. But inside, something had shifted. A door had closed that I hadn't realized was open before. I sat there, I would write later, but I had already been voted out long before this motion. The real blow came halfway through the meeting. Zadie stood up to present the next phase of their community outreach initiative. The proposal board rolled in, displaying logos, slogans, campaign mock-ups. My stomach tightened before I even saw the first slide. I recognized it. All of it. The layout, the phrasing, the branding language. It was mine. I'd drafted it on my laptop almost a year ago. Had shown the early ideas to Vespera during a late-night kitchen conversation, back when we still spoke like partners. Now it was Zadie's project. And Isolde? She clapped like Zadie had just rewritten the Constitution. "This captures the voice of the family perfectly," she said. No one noticed me sitting there, or maybe they did, and that was worse. I didn't speak. I didn't object. I opened my notebook and wrote down one line beneath a header I'd created earlier that week. Phase 3, Erase Replace. I added the date, time, title of the presentation. Then I let my mind do what it had been trained to do. Connect the dots, the shifted narratives, the ownership transfers, the gift, the gallery wall, Calder's name slip. This wasn't emotional. This was a pattern. When the meeting ended, people stood and stretched. The room buzzed with brunch chatter and weekend plans. Vespera caught me by the hallway. "You shouldn't have come," she said. "It made things awkward." "Awkward is watching people write you out while smiling," I replied. She sighed. "It's not personal." That's what people always say right before they do something unforgivable. She didn't argue, didn't apologize either. I left without raising my voice. My silence had a sharper edge than anything I could have said. That evening, back at the apartment, I sat on the floor beside the coffee table with my laptop open. I pulled together everything I'd saved, emails, drafts, original time-stamped files of the campaign. I labeled the folder, Contribution Proof, not for revenge, for truth, for the next time someone said I was never involved. "They're betting on me staying silent," I wrote in my notes. "I'm betting on records." Then I opened my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and tapped the name I'd highlighted 2 days earlier, Mize Whitlow. The call went through, we scheduled a consult, and just like that, the next phase began. Sunday crept in slow, quiet, heavy. I told myself it was just a maintenance run. The heater in the sunroom was acting up again, and no one else seemed to care. I still had the keys. No one had asked for them back. I wasn't sure if that meant I still had a right to use them, or if they simply assumed I wouldn't. The lock clicked just like it always had. I stepped into the Marin estate like I had so many times before, boots off, toolbox in hand, carrying the weight of tasks no one noticed until they were done wrong. But something had changed. My nameplate by the front entry? Gone. The small hook where I used to hang my cap? Replaced with a floral wall sconce. Even my old toolbox had been shoved to the far end of the garage, like a relic someone couldn't quite throw out but didn't want to see. Homes don't reject you all at once. They forget you little by little. I walked toward the utility room, filter in one hand, flashlight in the other. I muttered out of habit, "Fix what you love. Protect what you build." It's what I used to tell Calder when we worked on his Lego sets together, when he still called me Dad without thinking twice. In the corner of the utility room, on a side table beside a stack of light bulbs, sat a folder, manila, labeled, too neat for its surroundings. I opened it, and there it was. Deed transfer papers. My name, gone. The house now listed under Vespera's and Isolda's names. Not pending, not provisional. Final, recorded, stamped. A sticky note clipped to the front said, "Signed, recorded, final." The handwriting, hers, Vespera. There'd been no discussion, no courtesy call, no chance to object, just quiet execution. I didn't scream, didn't pace. I pulled my phone from my pocket and started taking pictures, every page, every date, every signature. "They think paper is stronger than memory," I whispered. "Let's see." Back in the living room, I walked to the HVAC panel. The filter was still the excuse. I removed the vent cover, checked the wiring, started a checklist in my head. But something else caught my eye. An outlet plate, slightly off-center, too clean. I unscrewed it. Behind it, tucked neatly into the framing, was a micro camera, wired, active, positioned to face the couch. I stared at it for a full minute. Weeks ago, Vespera had said something offhand during one of her brief drop-ins. Sometimes it helps to have a record, in case emotions run high. She hadn't said why. Now I knew. They'd been filming me, editing me, gathering footage to build a case, frame a narrative. Not for a documentary. No, this was a trial. I was the defendant, and they were the editors. Anger didn't rise like a flame. It folded itself into my ribs, tight, mechanical. They're not watching to protect themselves, I thought. They're watching to build a version of me they can legally dismiss. I pulled the device free with steady hands, placed it in a Ziploc from my toolbox, wiped down the outlet frame with a rag, snapped photos of the space, took notes, documented timestamp and angle. Later that evening, at my apartment, I uploaded everything to my secure cloud drive and titled the folder, Unseen Narrative. I texted Mize, found unauthorized surveillance device, likely part of narrative weaponization, sending materials now. Then I recorded a voice memo. Evidence collected, pattern consistent. They've moved from emotional exclusion to legal character assassination. That's the thing about survival. It's not always about making noise. Sometimes it's about collecting the right kind of silence. Before leaving the house, I passed the oak-framed mirror in the foyer. Isolda once called it the legacy frame. She said, "You should see yourself in it when you walk in, so you remember what you're part of." That day, I did see myself, not the ghost they hope to erase, but the man who no longer waited for permission to be counted. I walked to the hallway table, took a small yellow post-it from my notebook, the same color as the one on the deed, and wrote in ink, "Thanks for the reminder. I don't need walls to know what I built." I stuck it beside the lamp. Then I locked the door behind me, and as the bolts slid into place, I muttered, more to myself than to them, "They took the deed, but I still own the truth." The voicemail came at 4:32 p.m. I was halfway through reheating leftover pasta when the screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, I played it back on speaker. A woman's voice, professional, almost apologetic. "Hi, this is Janet from the Campbell Law Group, just calling to confirm receipt of the parental fitness documentation provided by Ms. Marin. We'll need Blaine Hoyt's signature on the acknowledgement form for review. Feel free to call us back at—" I paused it, stood there with my hands still on the microwave handle. My heart didn't race. My palms didn't sweat. I just stood very still. So they'd finally pulled the trigger. Fitness review, emotional documentation, footage. They were going to try to paint me unstable, again, only this time they were doing it through legal channels. I didn't call back. I sat down with my notebook and wrote, Tuesday, 4:32 p.m. Call from Campbell Law Group. Intended for someone else. Legal action pending, based on footage. Then I whispered something to myself I didn't know I believed until I said it aloud. They're trying to weaponize what they provoked. I opened my laptop and navigated to a folder I'd been quietly updating for over a year. I'd named it Instability Narrative as a joke at first. Then the name stuck. Inside were clips of me. At my worst, yes, yelling, slamming doors, pacing like a madman. But every one of them came with context. I had side-by-side video, source audio, uncut originals, and metadata. You'd be amazed what you learn to save when you've been gaslit long enough. I'd learned to hold on to more than memories. I labeled everything, not just files, but the emotion behind each moment. I tracked the buildup, what was said before, what they never captured on their clips, what they cut out. They thought I'd been messy. I'd been meticulous. They wanted me angry, explosive. So they could say, "See, he's the problem." What they didn't know was, I recorded myself recording them. I wasn't trying to be paranoid, I was trying to be precise. I opened a clip titled, Dinner, March, Sofa Argument. It showed me red-faced, agitated, hands in the air. But then I scrolled back 20 seconds. Isolde's voice cut through the air like vinegar. "No wonder Vespera wants you gone. You're weak in front of your own son." I froze the frame. There it was. The trigger. I took a screenshot of her face, mid-sentence, just before she smirked, printed the transcript, highlighted the exact line. Then I got to work. I created a folder called Full Context and started organizing the clips side by side. One column, their edits. Next to it, my reality. I granted access only to Mice Whitlow. She was the only one I trusted to see all of it and not flinch. Then I hit record. "If this is the story you want to tell," I said into the webcam, "then let's tell it together." Your edit next to mine. By 7:15, I was sitting across from Mize in the back room of a community center she used for clients like me, the kind who weren't rich, just ready. She reviewed the clips, read the transcript, played the voicemail again. Then she looked up and said, "They're not going to stop until they own the story, but we can make them regret ever publishing it." We got to work. Counter affidavit, metadata log, privacy compliance, chain of custody. I didn't want revenge. Not anymore. I wanted integrity. I wanted my truth on record before they erased it and called it justice. "They thought I'd melt down," I said as we packed up. "Instead," I added, "I sharpened." That night, back home, I sat at my desk and printed the still frame of Isolde. Right at the moment her lips curled around the word weak. Below it, in bold black marker, I wrote, "Push him far enough." I folded the paper, slid it into an envelope, and wrote, "Thursday, family night." I stood at the window, watching the rain smear the streetlight outside. "They've been casting me for the role of failure," I said out loud. "Let's see how they respond when I turn the camera back on them." The invitation arrived in a gold envelope, hand-delivered. Polite on the surface, cold in intent. Marin Legacy Appreciation Dinner. Thursday evening. Black tie, family only. I wasn't surprised. They were hoping I'd decline. That I'd be too ashamed, too isolated, too tired. They wanted a quiet ending. Instead, I dry-cleaned the only suit they hadn't seen me wear in years and drove myself to the Marin event hall, 15 minutes early. I parked 2 blocks away, walked the distance, and cleared my head. Inside, the room glowed with chandeliers and thin smiles. Everyone wore coordinated colors. The servers moved like background dancers. The chairs were velvet. Mine, near the swinging kitchen door. A young caterer approached me, tray in hand. "Sir, are you with the team?" I nodded once. No use correcting her. I found the AV booth tucked in the back corner. The technician looked like a college kid just trying to keep his head down. I handed him the thumb drive. "When I nod," I said. He nodded back. No questions. They wanted this dinner to shape the narrative, I thought. So I brought a better projector. After the obligatory toasts and speech from Isolde about family legacy and resilience, I stood. "Thank you for this evening," I said, voice steady. "Since we're celebrating family, I brought something. A few clips that showed just how tightly we're bound." Some guests smiled, expecting nostalgia. The lights dimmed. The first clip played, me, angry, loud, flushed, gasps. A few heads turned, then the screen split. Same moment, but with context. I was defending Calder, being talked over, dismissed, provoked. My voice rose, yes, but so did the pressure. The framing changed everything. Second clip, me slamming a door. Split screen again. A few seconds earlier, Vespera told me I was being removed from the deed, that the house was better off in safer hands. Third clip, me pacing, fists clenched. Context. Isolde had called me temporary, told me my presence wouldn't last, and I should start planning my exit. The murmurs grew louder. Aunt Marianne covered her mouth. Isolde didn't move, just blinked. I stepped to the side, letting the final clip take the screen. A photo of me, sleeping, a quiet breath. My face slack in the dark. It was taken from above, camera angle hidden in the ceiling vent. Then the text faded in. "You still don't know what I'm capable of." I didn't wait for the gasps. I spoke over it. This was sent to me after I discovered a surveillance device in the living room of the home I helped build. It was hidden. It recorded everything, without consent. I pulled a sealed bag from my briefcase, held it high. This is the device, still functional, still wired. Several heads turned, a few guests stood. I wasn't just being monitored, I said. I was being rewritten. Isolde finally opened her mouth. "This is out of context." "It's selective editing." "No," I said. "I brought context. You brought performance." Vespera stood next, her voice low, tight. "You didn't have to do this here." "No," I said. "But you shouldn't have brought me here to be edited." Knoxley, quiet, always watching, finally said something. "He's not wrong." That did more damage than the footage, because it meant someone had finally stopped nodding along. Silence filled the room, not the awkward kind, the heavy kind. the kind that listens. I took a breath, looked around the room, looked at the faces I once tried to be accepted by. I didn't play this to punish you, I said. I played it to protect the only thing that matters now. Truth. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a napkin, neatly folded into a leaf. I placed it gently on the table in front of Isolde. Elegance, I said, isn't silence. It's honesty, held well. I left the room before anyone could speak. No applause, no rage. Just the soft click of the door behind me. Outside, the air felt real again. I let it fill my lungs, let them choke on the edits. I brought the real. The apartment was quiet in a way I hadn't heard in years. Not just the absence of noise, no vents humming, no creaks from old pipes, but the absence of pressure. No weight waiting to drop, no gaze following me from behind walls. Just light, soft, and slow, pushing through the window blinds like it had nowhere else to be. I got up early that morning. No alarm, no agenda, just the kind of wakefulness that comes from finally being done with surviving. The box sat on the shelf above my desk. I hadn't opened it since the dinner. Inside were documents, printouts, hard drives, evidence, not weapons, just records, just proof. They didn't hold power anymore, not over me. I used to think that winning meant changing how they saw me. I don't believe that anymore. I don't need justice from them, I said out loud. I needed clarity from me. Calder wandered in from the guest room, hair messy, dragging his pillow with him. I made eggs and toast. Nothing fancy. No filter on the conversation, no quiet measuring of what could be said. I handed him his plate, and for the first time in weeks, he looked me straight in the eye and smiled before eating. Freedom doesn't roar, it exhales. Later that morning, I was cleaning out a drawer when I found it. The napkin, the one I folded and left on Isolde's plate. Leaf-shaped. White cotton, perfect symmetry. I held it in my hands and just stared at it for a moment. Funny, I whispered. How elegance used to mean performance. I used to chase it. That image of the composed, quiet in-law who never caused trouble, who smiled in photos, who stayed out of decisions, who stayed in line. Now, elegance meant walking away before you became what they said you were. I tucked the napkin into a file folder, labeled, unreturned. She could keep the insult. I had no use for it anymore. That afternoon, Calder and I stopped by a small cafe after school. We sat near the window, just the two of us. He didn't look at his phone once. Midway through his grilled cheese, he looked up and asked, "Are we okay, you and me?" I set my coffee down. My breath caught, not from fear, but from the tenderness of the question. "We're better than okay," I said. "We're honest." He nodded slowly, then added, "Grandma said you might move far away." I shook my head. "She doesn't speak for me anymore," I said. "You do?" He smiled. Not wide, but sure. It wasn't a courtroom win. No one clapped, but it was real and mutual. We chose each other again, and that's all I ever wanted. Friday morning, I sat across from Mace at the county courthouse. She was composed. I was quiet. Vespera and Isolde sat across the aisle. Their faces gave nothing away. I didn't look at them long. No cameras, no press, just a room and a judge and paper. After reviewing evidence, timelines, and intent, the judge ruled the deed transfer was invalid. My name would be restored. I didn't fist pump. Didn't smirk. I just thanked the court, signed where they told me to sign, and left. Winning isn't always loud, I told Mize in the parking lot. Sometimes it's a signature on paper while the other side quietly falls apart. That night, back in the apartment, I placed the court-stamped deed beside a crayon drawing Calder had made. Us standing outside a small blue house. He labeled it, Our Real Home. I looked at the screen of my laptop. My story, this story, was written, ready. Not for pity, not for likes, but for anyone who'd ever been erased and needed to remember they were real. They tried to erase me with footage, I whispered, with silence, with legal language and softened smiles. I answered with proof, with memory, with my name. I closed the laptop. I never needed them to love me. I just needed them to stop pretending I didn't exist.